Emma skipped off the school bus with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She smiled when she saw the familiar maple tree in front of their house, until something bright caught her eye. A large white sign stood in the middle of the yard. Under contract. She frowned. She didn't understand what it meant. Her grandfather, Harold Bennett, stepped out onto the porch with a ring of keys in his hand. His face showed none of the warmth she expected. "Grandpa," Emma called. He walked down the front steps and stopped a few feet away. "You don't live here anymore," he said flatly. "Wait by the gate." Emma blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Stay by the gate. Your mother knows." He turned around before she could ask another question. The front door shut. The lock clicked. Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the closed door of the only home she'd ever known. At first, she thought it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe her grandfather was playing a strange joke. Maybe her mother was coming home any minute to explain everything. So she waited exactly where she'd been told. School children walked past on their way home. Cars slowed as neighbors noticed the little girl standing alone beside the gate. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street eventually crossed over with a worried expression. "Honey, are you all right?" Emma nodded politely. "Grandpa said to wait here." "For how long?" "I don't know." Mrs. Alvarez looked toward the house. Harold opened the curtain just enough to see outside before letting it fall again. When she knocked on the front door, Harold answered only long enough to say, "Her mother already knows what's going on." The certainty in his voice made it difficult to question him. Still, something felt terribly wrong. Mrs. Alvarez brought Emma a blanket and a bottle of water. Other neighbors checked in throughout the afternoon, but Emma refused to leave the gate. "My grandpa told me to stay here," she whispered each time. Hours passed. Several hundred miles away, Myla Bennett was wrapping up a mandatory compliance meeting for the regional mortgage division she worked for. Her phone had been silenced since early morning. By the time the presentations ended, the screen lit up with missed calls, unread messages, and one voicemail after another. She frowned. Most were from neighbors. The last voicemail came from Mrs. Alvarez. "Myla, please call me immediately. It's about Emma." A chill settled over her. She called back before reaching the parking lot. Mrs. Alvarez answered on the first ring. "Myla," she said, her voice shaking, "your daughter has been standing outside your own house for hours." For a moment, Myla couldn't process the words. "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Alvarez took a breath. "There's an under-contract sign in your yard, and your father won't let Emma inside." Myla's stomach dropped. She abandoned everything, grabbed her car keys, and started the long drive home. Less than 20 minutes into the trip, another notification appeared on her phone. It was a photograph from a different neighbor. The under-contract sign stood in the yard. And beneath the front porch, the plaque with her family's name had been removed. By the time Myla pulled onto her street, the sun had already slipped below the rooftops. She didn't even shut off the engine before jumping out of the car. Emma was sitting on a folding chair beside Mrs. Alvarez's porch, wrapped in a thick blanket that dwarfed her small frame. Her backpack rested at her feet exactly as she dropped it after getting off the school bus. The moment she saw her mother, she ran. Myla knelt and held her so tightly that Emma could barely speak. "I'm sorry," Myla whispered. "I'm so sorry." Emma pulled back just enough to search her mother's face. "Grandpa said this isn't our house anymore." Myla swallowed hard. "He said I had to wait by the gate." A long pause followed. Then came the question that broke something inside her. "Was I bad?" Myla immediately shook her head. "No," her voice was firm despite the tears threatening to surface. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is because of you." Emma leaned into her again, finally allowing herself to cry. Mrs. Alvarez quietly stepped forward. "We couldn't convince her to leave," she said softly. She kept saying her grandfather told her to stay exactly where she was. Myla closed her eyes for a second. Thank you for staying with her. You would have done the same. After making sure Emma was warm and safe inside Mrs. Alvarez's living room with a cup of hot chocolate, Myla finally looked across the street toward her own house. The porch light was on. The curtains were closed. It looked exactly like home. Yet somehow it no longer felt like it. As she crossed the yard, memories flooded back. She remembered signing the closing documents 8 years earlier, after working overtime for nearly 3 years to save the down payment. She remembered painting Emma's nursery herself. She remembered calling her parents when they lost their apartment after Harold's contracting business collapsed. You can stay with us, she'd told them without hesitation, until you're back on your feet. That arrangement was supposed to last a few months. Instead, Harold slowly began acting as though generosity meant surrender. At first it was small things. He hired landscapers without asking. Then he replaced the mailbox because he didn't like the old one. A few months later, he changed the front door locks, insisting it was for everyone's safety. Whenever Myla questioned him, he waved her concerns away. I'm just taking care of the place. She wanted peace more than confrontation. So she accepted explanation after explanation. Looking back now, every compromise had quietly shifted the balance of power. Mrs. Alvarez's husband walked over before Myla reached the front steps. I need to tell you something. Myla turned. There were people here all week. What people? Buyers, I think. He pointed toward the driveway. Different cars every day. Your father showed them around the house. He introduced himself as the owner. Myla stared at him. Did anyone ask where I was? He said you were traveling, and he'd handle everything. Another neighbor joined them. I thought maybe you decided to sell. So did we, someone else admitted. No one imagined. The sentence trailed off. There was nothing left to say. Myla thanked them quietly before climbing the porch steps. She unlocked the front door with her own key. Inside, Harold sat comfortably in his favorite recliner, as though nothing unusual had happened. Linda sat silently on the sofa, her hands clasped together so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Harold didn't even stand. I wondered when you'd get back. Myla looked from him to the family photographs still hanging on the wall. Then to the empty space near the entrance where the framed deed copy usually hung. Finally, she spoke. You made my daughter stand outside for 5 hours. Harold shrugged. She wasn't hurt. She is 8. I told her to wait. You told her she didn't live here anymore. Harold leaned back. Because she doesn't. Silence settled over the room. Linda lowered her eyes. Myla waited, giving her father every opportunity to explain. Instead, he smiled with quiet satisfaction. It's already done, he said. The house has been sold. Myla studied his face for a long moment. There was no panic. No guilt. Only certainty. Then she gave a slow nod. I hope, she said evenly, you enjoyed today. The following morning, the quiet neighborhood felt strangely busy. A moving truck backed slowly toward the driveway. 2 real estate agents stood near the front walk, reviewing paperwork on clipboards. A young couple climbed out of an SUV with excited smiles, pointing toward the front porch as they imagined their future home. Harold greeted them with the confidence of someone welcoming guests into his own property. Perfect timing, he said. We'll have everything wrapped up this morning. The buyers smiled politely. We can't wait to get the keys. Harold chuckled. You'll have them soon enough. Across the street, several neighbors watched from their porches. After yesterday, curiosity had replaced routine. Then another car pulled up. Myla stepped out carrying a slim leather folder. Emma remained in the passenger seat with Mrs. Alvarez, who had insisted on staying with her until everything was over. Myla walked calmly toward the group. One of the real estate agents extended a hand. "You must be Mr. Bennett's daughter." "My name is Myla Bennett," she replied. "I'm the sole legal owner of this property." The sentence landed like a stone. The buyers exchanged confused glances. The realtor looked from Harold to Myla. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I purchased this home 8 years ago. The deed has never been transferred." Harold laughed dismissively. "Don't listen to her. I have full authority." He reached into his briefcase and produced several documents. "My daughter signed a power of attorney years ago." Without raising her voice, Myla opened her folder and placed certified copies of the recorded property deed on the hood of a nearby car. "This is the current ownership record." The realtor frowned and began comparing names, dates, and signatures. For the first time that morning, uncertainty spread across the group. The young couple stepped back from the porch. "Should we be here?" the woman asked quietly. "No one is taking possession of anything," Myla answered. "Not until the ownership issue is resolved." Harold's expression hardened. "There is no issue." Before anyone could respond, the title representative's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. "I need to take this." She walked several steps away and answered in a low voice. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When she returned, the confidence she'd shown earlier had disappeared. She looked directly at the realtor. "Stop the closing." Harold frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The transaction is suspended effective immediately." The realtor blinked. "Suspended? Why?" "I'm not authorized to discuss the details." The buyers looked alarmed. "Is something wrong with the title?" the husband asked. "I'm sorry," the representative replied carefully. "We cannot proceed today." Whispers spread among the neighbors gathered near the sidewalk. Harold's voice rose. "This is ridiculous. We have a signed agreement." "The documents need additional review." "What review?" "I'm unable to answer that." Harold stepped closer. "You can't just cancel my sale." "It isn't your sale to continue." The words hung in the air. For the first time since Myla had returned home, Harold looked genuinely unsettled. He turned toward Myla. "You did this." She met his stare without flinching. "I protected what belongs to my daughter." The title representative gathered every document from the folding table, placed them into a secure envelope, and sealed it in front of everyone. "No paperwork leaves my custody," she said. The buyers quietly walked back toward their SUV. "I think we'd better speak with our attorney," the husband murmured. The realtor nodded in agreement. No one argued. No one reached for the keys. The entire closing had come to a standstill. Harold looked around the yard, as though waiting for someone to restore the control he had enjoyed only minutes earlier. Instead, 2 unfamiliar vehicles pulled to the curb. Their doors opened. 2 professionally dressed investigators stepped onto the sidewalk, each carrying an identification wallet. One of them looked directly at Harold. "Mr. Bennett." Harold straightened instinctively. "Yes. We need to speak with you regarding the documents used in this property transaction." The investigators introduced themselves and displayed their identification before anyone spoke. "Mr. Bennett," the older investigator said evenly, "we'd like to ask you a few questions regarding the documentation submitted for this property." Harold folded his arms. "I've done nothing wrong. We're simply gathering information." The title representative handed over the sealed envelope containing the closing documents. "These are all the originals that were presented this morning." "Thank you," the investigator replied. The buyers stood off to one side, quietly discussing whether they should leave. The realtor apologized repeatedly for the confusion, explaining that the closing could not continue until ownership questions were resolved. Myla remained silent. She wasn't interested in arguing in front of strangers. She wanted the truth documented. One investigator asked that everyone be interviewed separately. Harold went first. He insisted Myla had authorized him years earlier to handle anything involving the property. When asked when the authorization had been signed, he hesitated. I don't remember the exact date. Do you have the original? It should be in the paperwork. The investigator simply made another note. Next came the realtor, who explained every meeting had been arranged through Harold. He always introduced himself as the homeowner, she said. Nothing he told us suggested otherwise. The notary confirmed Harold had presented identification matching the name on the paperwork, but admitted there had been no direct contact with Myla before the transaction. Finally, the investigators spoke with several neighbors. Mrs. Alvarez described finding Emma standing outside the gate. I asked if she wanted to come inside, she said. She refused because her grandfather told her to wait. Another neighbor added, she never wandered off. She stayed exactly where he left her. One investigator asked, would any nearby security cameras have recorded that? 3 neighbors nodded almost at once. Our doorbell cameras face the street. We have one above the garage. And mine covers the front sidewalk. Within the hour, each homeowner voluntarily shared the recordings. The footage showed Emma arriving home from school. It showed Harold meeting her at the gate. Although there was no audio, his gestures were unmistakable. He pointed toward the sidewalk. Emma stopped. Harold walked back inside and closed the door. The recordings continued for hours. Emma remained where she had been told. Mrs. Alvarez bringing her a blanket. Neighbors checking on her. Cars slowing as drivers noticed the little girl waiting alone. The investigators watched quietly. When the final clip ended, the room fell silent. One of them closed the laptop. Thank you, he said. Harold no longer looked confident. As additional records were reviewed, investigators compared phone logs with the timeline of the attempted sale. Multiple calls had been placed to the realtor, the title company, and contractors, while Harold represented himself as the owner of the property. Each piece fit more neatly than the last. Linda, who had remained silent throughout the morning, finally lowered her face into her hands. I told him not to do this, she whispered. Harold turned toward her. Linda. No. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. I begged you to wait until Myla came home. She looked toward her daughter. I told him this house wasn't ours to sell. Harold stared at her in disbelief. You said family sticks together. I said family doesn't betray each other. The words hung heavily in the room. One investigator carefully gathered the remaining documents. Mr. Bennett, he said, these records will be retained while the matter is reviewed. The buyers informed the realtor they were withdrawing from the purchase. We don't want any part of this, the husband said quietly. The moving truck pulled away without unloading a single box. The front yard that had seemed so busy only an hour earlier slowly emptied. For the first time since all of this had begun, Harold stood alone. Then his cell phone rang. He glanced at the screen and answered immediately. Hello. His expression changed almost instantly. The confidence disappeared from his face as he listened in complete silence. Harold lowered the phone slowly. What did they say? Linda asked. He didn't answer. The investigator looked at him. Mr. Bennett. Harold swallowed before speaking. The title company. His voice faltered. They canceled the transaction. The title representative nodded. Not only has the transaction been canceled, but the documents submitted to authorize the sale have been referred to our fraud division. They were determined to contain significant irregularities that require further investigation. The buyers quietly shook their heads. So the house was never legally ours to buy. I'm afraid not, the representative replied. The property has remained in Ms. Bennett's name throughout. The couple thanked Myla for her composure before leaving. "We're sorry this happened to your family," the wife said. "So am I," Myla answered. As the driveway emptied, one of the investigators turned toward Myla. "Ms. Bennett, we'd like to confirm one detail. When did you first become aware something was wrong?" "My neighbors sent me photographs while I was driving home yesterday." "And what did you do?" "I called the title company immediately." She reached into her folder and removed several pages. "I asked to speak with their fraud department. After explaining that I had never listed my house for sale and had never signed a power of attorney, they advised me not to confront anyone until the transaction could be stopped properly." The investigator nodded. "And after that?" "I contacted my attorney. Then I filed a report with local authorities before I arrived home." Harold stared at her. "You already knew?" Myla looked at him calmly. "When I walked into the house last night and you said, 'It's already done,' I already knew the sale couldn't go through." Harold blinked. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because arguing with you wouldn't protect my daughter." She paused. "The law would." For a long moment, no one spoke. Linda began crying quietly. "I'm so sorry, Myla." Myla looked at her mother with sadness rather than anger. "I opened this home because I wanted you both to feel safe." Linda nodded through tears. "I know. I trusted you. I know. But yesterday, Emma came home believing she didn't belong in her own house." Linda covered her face. "There isn't an apology big enough for that." The investigators finished, collecting the remaining evidence. "Mr. Bennett," one of them said, "you'll be contacted regarding the next steps in this investigation. You're also advised not to attempt any further transactions involving this property." Harold didn't argue. For the first time, he seemed to understand that this was no longer a dispute he could control. Over the following weeks, the attempted sale officially collapsed. The buyers recovered their deposit and found another home. The realtor cooperated fully with investigators after learning she had relied on false representations. Civil proceedings began to address the financial losses caused by the fraudulent transaction, while the investigation into the forged documents continued through the appropriate legal process. Linda chose to move into a small apartment of her own. Before leaving, she hugged Emma tightly. "I should have protected you," she whispered. Emma hugged her back. "I still love you, Grandma." Those simple words brought fresh tears to Linda's eyes. Harold left the house without another argument. There were no dramatic speeches. No final attempt to justify what he had done. Only the quiet realization that the authority he believed he possessed had disappeared the moment his actions were exposed. For Myla, the changes were practical as much as emotional. She had every lock replaced. Emergency contacts at Emma's school were updated. Access to the property was carefully documented, and she worked with her attorney to place the home into a trust designed to protect Emma's future. For the first time in years, the house truly felt peaceful. The neighbors, who had unknowingly accepted Harold's claims, rallied around Myla and Emma. Mrs. Alvarez stopped by often. "If you ever need anything," she said one afternoon, "you're not alone." Weeks later, Emma stepped off the school bus once again. She smiled as she walked toward the front yard. The large under contract sign was gone. In its place, colorful flowers lined the walkway leading to the porch. Myla stood at the front door waiting. Emma ran through the gate without slowing down. She wrapped her arms around her mother. "We're home," she said. Myla smiled and kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Yes," she replied, "and no one will ever make you question that again." As they walked inside together, the afternoon sun settled across the front porch. The house had never really been defined by the deed filed at the courthouse. It had always been defined by the people who loved each other inside its walls. Harold had believed ownership was something he could simply claim. He learned too late that a signature can be forged, Authority can be abused, and trust can be broken. But a real home is protected by honesty, responsibility, and the courage to stand up for the people who depend on you most.